It's not a budget that does the job.
Order.
In charting
Senator
our
McAllister, it's been 2 p.m.
President.
You'll be in continuation, and we'll go to questions. Senator McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Women, Senator Ruston. Can the minister confirm that of the approximately 754,000 women currently without work and on job seeker or youth allowance, 61% are aged over 35 years?
The Minister representing the Minister for Women, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I thank Senator McCarthy for her question. What I can confirm, Senator McCarthy, is that when the pandemic first hit, that we did see that women were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic when it came to job losses. What I can also tell Senator McCarthy is that prior to the pandemic, we did have a disproportionate number of older Australians and also older female or women who were represented on social security payments. This was probably a result of many things, including many measures that have been put in place prior to the pandemic and many measures that have been put in place over a number of years, not the least of which was the increase in the number of young people that were coming off unemployment and going into work. Also the fact that we had changes to our pension arrangements like the wife pension, and these changes had taken place over quite a long period of time and successive governments. And as a result of the fact that we had started to see probably a disproportionate number of older Australians on unemployment benefits or on welfare, the government has taken a number of initiatives to support older people who find themselves unemployed.
Order. Senator Ruston. Senator Wong on a point of order.
Point of order. It was a very succinct and specific question which asked the minister to confirm the numbers of women without work and on job seeker and youth allowance. They were the only words and subject points raised. So I would ask the minister. It's in excess of a minute. I understand she has taken time to get to the answer. If she could confirm Senator McCarthy's question.
It was a very specific and factual question, and I've said in the chair that when such specific and factual questions are asked, the directly relevant test is quite a narrow one. So, Senator Wong, you've reminded the minister of the question. I do so as well. Senator Ruston to continue.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, I will get the exact statistic for Senator McCarthy to make sure, because as you would quite imagine, we do see the figures around unemployment moving around quite significantly at the moment, but I will certainly make sure that I get the absolute and specific statistic provided to you. Yes, and so in fact, I can give you statistics that are old, but I would like to make sure that I give you a statistic that is current post-pandemic, because as you would be aware, that statistics pre-pandemic probably don't mean a great deal. But anyway, as I was about to inform Senator McCarthy, there have been a significant number of measures that have been put in place in recognition that we have a high number of older Australians who find themselves out of work.
Order. Senator Ruston. Senator McCarthy, a supplementary question.
What advice does the minister have for the 460,000 women who are aged over 35 years, are without work, face a future of living on $40 a day, have been excluded from the Morrison government's hiring credit scheme and will need to compete against younger subsidised job seekers?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you, Senator McCarthy. One of the things that I can absolutely confirm to Senator McCarthy is that this government understands that their older Australians often find barriers to getting into work, which is why, amongst a number of initiatives that were put down prior to the pandemic, if you'd listen, I will actually tell you about the measures that we've put in place, including, for instance, as an example, the Restart program. And we talked a lot at the budget this week around the wage subsidy for younger Australians, and I'd just like to advise the chamber that in the 18-19 budget, the government put in place the Restart program, which is actually a wage subsidy for older Australians. So older Australians over the age of 50 have access to a $10,000 wage subsidy, or their employer has access to a $10,000 wage subsidy. And I'm really pleased to be able to advise the chamber that 50,000 older Australians have actually been the beneficiary of of that wage subsidy specifically dedicated to older Australians.
Well, Senator McCarthy, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Research released by the Independent Parliamentary Budget Office last week revealed a 23 percentage point increase to 71% in the number of women on unemployment benefits for years. The Morrison government excluded many of these women from JobKeeper. Isn't their exclusion from the hiring credit scheme just the latest example of the Morrison government leaving women behind?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, not at all. The Morrison government has been absolutely dedicated to supporting all Australians, either before the pandemic but most particularly through the pandemic, with an absolutely unprecedented amount of money that has been provided to support all Australians, and that includes older Australians. But as I said before, we already had in place a number of very significant packages to help older Australians, but we must not forget that when the pandemic hit, we saw a doubling or 100% increase in the number of people who were requiring the support of our unemployment benefit system. 150% increase in those under the age of 35. And I would suggest that if I had come into this place after the budget where we hadn't actually addressed youth unemployment, you would be standing here criticising me because we were not actually assisting young people who have been disproportionately impacted by the number of jobs that have lost. So I think our track record in supporting older Australians
Senator
stands.
Ruston. Senator McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds. Can the minister update the Senate on what the Morrison government's 2020 and 21 defence budget delivers for Australia's national security?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you very much to Senator McLaughlin for his question and also for his very strong support for the South Australian defence industry and more generally, so thank you. Protecting our nation's security and sovereignty is essential to Australia's economic stability and also its prosperity. The 2020-21 Morrison government's defence budget is all about a safer and stronger Australia now and into the future. This government remains firmly committed to keeping Australians safe while protecting our nation's interests and also assisting our economy during the COVID-19 pandemic. This budget sees sustained and very strong investment in Australia's defence, with a 10-year funding model of $575 billion over the next decade. This delivers on the Morrison government's commitment to grow the defence budget to 2% of GDP in the 2021 financial year, and this achieves a commitment we made in 2013. Our focus in the budget and in our strategic update is on regional security, on maintaining our capability edge, while creating Australian jobs. It also focuses on boosting cyber resilience and also supporting Australia's sovereign defence industries. This budget locks in $270 billion of investment over the next 10 years to continue to develop the capabilities of the Australian Defence Force. There is also a $1 billion investment that provides new and also unprecedented opportunities for Australia's defence industry that has been impacted by COVID-19, and this will sustain over 4,000 Australian jobs. Defence is also committed to supporting Australians right here at home during emergencies of national significance. And that's why the Morrison government is strengthening the ADF's ability to respond to natural disasters, to domestic emergencies and also to pandemics, both here in Australia and also overseas.
Senator McLaughlin, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister advise the Senate how the government's defence investments are creating jobs and helping rebuild our economy, including in my home state of South Australia?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and again I thank Senator McLaughlin for that question. Continuing to develop Australia's sovereign defence industry is crucial to our nation's economic recovery and also, as I've said, to the creation of many more multi-generational jobs for Australians. Currently, there are already over 15,000 Australian companies in the defence supply chains, and that represents over 70,000 Australian workers who are benefiting from our government's investment in defence. And these numbers are continuing to grow even during the COVID-19 pandemic. And South Australia is a key part of the government's investment in building Australia's maritime defence capability and also our defence industries. Just last week, the Prime Minister was in South Australia, opening the $535 million world-leading shipyard in Osborne South, which heralds the beginning of another local shipbuilding job boom in South Australia.
Senator McLaughlin, a final supplementary question.
Can the minister outline the importance of long-term certainty for the defence budget?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President. As I've said many times in this chamber, Australia's strategic environment is increasingly complex and it is also increasingly contested. That's why this government's unprecedented investment in defence capability and also long-term funding certainty that we have committed to in this budget is vitally important. It is important not only for the Australian Defence Force and for defence, it is also vitally important for Australia's defence industries. This 10-year investment of $575 billion, as I've said, $270 billion for new capability, will strengthen not only the capability and the resilience of the Australian Defence Force, but also of our industries and of the many tens of thousands of jobs right here in Australia. This government is delivering the much-needed certainty for both the Defence Force and the ADF. And the result of that will be that our Defence Forces will not only today be postured to deploy military power to shape our environment, to deter actions, and also to respond if necessary.
Senator Keneally.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Women, Senator Ruston. Approximately 200,000 women have lost their jobs since March, and 110,000 have left the labour force. Why did Mr Morrison's budget provide nothing to support women's workforce participation?
The Minister representing the Minister for Women, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Keneally for her question. Well, I would actually refute that the budget that was brought down on Tuesday night by Mr Morrison and the Treasurer, Mr Frydenberg, didn't contain anything in relation to women's workforce participation. In fact, the very substance of the Women's Economic Security Statement is around enhancing women's economic participation. We all know that prior to the pandemic that economic participation by women in the Australian workforce was actually at an all-time high, and we also had seen the gender pay gap reduced to its lowest level ever. So, as part of the Women's Economic Statement, Security Statement on Tuesday night, we sought to undertake a number of initiatives that were really focused on making sure that we were focused very much on providing specific and particular initiatives around workforce participation. But that must not be exclude the fact that many other initiatives in the budget that were not contained in the Women's Economic Security Statement are also available for women to be able to access. And I think those opposite can be mucking around, but the reality is that just about every single measure in the budget that women are able to benefit from all of those measures. So, women benefit from university educations, women benefit from workplace and employment. Senator Cash's skills programs also benefit women, but targeting specific women's economic participation was the Women's Economic Security Statement. And there are a number of initiatives that were contained in this statement with 5 very specific priorities to build and repair women's workforce participation and further close the gender pay gap. That was absolutely the specific reason and the absolute priority of the Women's Economic Security Statement, along with many other measures in the budget.
Senator Ruston. Senator Keneally, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Recent studies by KPMG and Grattan reveal women returning to work can lose 20 cents for every dollar they earn from an extra day's work due to childcare fees. Why did the Morrison government's budget fail to make childcare cheaper for Australian families?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, what I would say is the Morrison government has a very proud track record when it comes to the affordability of childcare for Australian families and particularly for Australian women seeking to return to the workforce, and it is a very important component of making sure that women's workforce participation are at high levels. And as I said to the answer to the primary question, before the pandemic, Australia's women's workforce participation levels were at an all-time record. But also, I would also draw to the attention of the chamber the fact that this government, the Morrison government, will spend in this 2020-2021 year $9 billion supporting Australian parents with childcare subsidies. That is in addition to the $900 million that was specifically set aside during the pandemic to help Australia's parents through the very, very difficult circumstances that they all found themselves during the pandemic, and particularly those people that were taking on important care and support roles.
Order. Senator Keneally. Order on my right. Senator Keneally, a final supplementary question.
Mr. President, women have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, taking on 2/3 of the unpaid care work at home. Why, despite racking up $1 trillion in debt, is there no assistance to help get these women back into the workforce?
Senator Ruston.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, I would once again refute the premise of the statement that was just made by Senator Keneally, that the government is not doing a number of things to assist all Australians, including Australian women, back into the workforce. As I said, an absolute record investment in childcare to enable them to be able to get back to work. The investment that has been made in the portfolio area of Minister Cash around making sure that we focus on reskilling. I mean, in the Women's Economic Security Statement, as an example, I mean, there are a number of initiatives that focus specifically about empowering women, getting women into leadership roles, and making sure that, that women are
Senator
able
Ruston,
to
please
participate.
resume your seat. There's interjections across the chamber. I can't hear the minister. Senator Wong, on a point of order.
I'm going to give leave to Senator Rennick to make the statement about
childcare.
Senator
Wong. That's not a point of order, Senator Wong.
Ahead.
Please resume your seat, Senator Wong. Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Points of order are for points of order, not for debate. Senator Ruston, you may continue in silence in the chamber.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. But as I was saying, in the Women's Economic Security Statement, there are a number of initiatives that particularly target making sure that we are providing the support for women to be able to get back into the workforce, get ahead in the workforce. Expanding and boosting the Female Founders Initiative, a fantastic initiative that's already underway. I mean, the paid parental
Senator
leave
Ruston,
scheme.
time for the answer has expired. Order. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to Senator Cormann, representing the Prime Minister. The arts and entertainment industry was the first and hardest hit by COVID restrictions. It will be one of the last to recover. It has seen the second highest number of job losses after accommodation and hospitality, which of course rely on the arts and entertainment sector as well. For every $1 million in turnover, arts and entertainment produce 9 jobs. Construction produces only 1. Yet the Treasurer on Tuesday night didn't even utter the word art in his speech. Why has the $112 billion a year arts and entertainment industry been so forgotten by your government?
Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Far from being forgotten, because the arts and entertainment industry was one of the first and hardest hit. It was one of the first to get the support from the Morrison government. The Morrison government is working hard to deliver on our plan to support the arts and entertainment sector during COVID-19. We have secured almost $800 million in extra arts and entertainment funding, on top of our record annual investment of around $750 million in core funding, and on top of the $336 million provided to date through JobKeeper. During one of our nation's most testing times, Australians have looked to our leaders to provide accurate and honest information, provide support to those who need it, and manage public money responsibly. And that is, of course, why our government has provided very substantial support to this sector. And it would be great if senators across the chamber could recognise that very strong commitment and contribution that we've made.
Senator Hanson-Young, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a supplementary question. The German government has pledged €1 billion in response to this crisis. The UK government, £1.57 billion. France extended their unemployment scheme for actors, performers, musicians, technicians, guaranteeing their pay for 1.3 million people. Senator Cormann, how will your ignoring of the arts play in your bid for General Secretary to the OECD?
Senator Cormann.
Let me just reconfirm, and I'm sure that our friends in France, nos amis en France, and our friends in Germany, unsere deutschen Freunde, would be very impressed to see the very serious commitment that the Morrison government has made to supporting the arts and entertainment sector here in Australia. Of course, every country and every economy deals with the challenges it faces in its own way, consistent with its capacity, and we are doing the best we can in the context of what is clearly a very challenging situation. And I think that all reasonable Australians and all of our friends across the OECD would very much agree with that.
Senator Hanson-Young, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. It's mostly women who work in the sectors that have been hardest hit: hospitality, retail and the arts and the entertainment sector, yet the Morrison government has largely left them out. Minister, do women matter? And has Tony Abbott's women's problem infected the Prime Minister?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Thank you very much, Mr President. Of course, women matter. They matter very much. And under our government, after the first 6 years of the Liberal National government, we had the highest workforce participation of women ever on record. The gender pay gap was the lowest ever on record here in Australia after 6 years of a coalition Liberal National government. Of course, women and young people were particularly hard hit from the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic. But women and young people also have proportionately been the biggest beneficiaries of the recovery getting underway. And our plan to get Australia out of this COVID recession, our plan to maximise the strength of our recovery and our economic and our jobs recovery is very much going to be beneficial to all Australians, but in particular women and young people around Australia, because they will proportionally benefit the most from the strong recovery that our government is working on.
Senator Gallagher.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Finance. Probably my last question to you in question time, Senator Cormann. I know you'll miss me. I refer to analysis by the Institute of Public Affairs based on data from the Morrison government's budget and the ABS, which reveals that gross Commonwealth government debt will peak at $2.05 trillion in 2045. Is this analysis by the Institute of Public Affairs accurate?
Senator, Minister for Finance, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much. I thank Senator Gallagher for that question. Really, I think Senator Gallagher wanted to make sure that before I leave this chamber, I truly had seen everything. I truly had seen everything. I now have the Shadow Minister for Finance quoting the Institute of Public Affairs as Exhibit 1, as Exhibit A. Let me just say the answer to that question is no. I can't confirm that analysis. The Labor Party is trying to suggest that we can't make projections 10 years out, and Senator Gallagher is suggesting that somehow there is a capacity to make projections 35 years out. Let me just say, and of course, the argument that is being prosecuted by the opposition right now, the argument the opposition is prosecuting right now is that we should spend more. We should spend more, and we should have a lower deficit and lower debt. Like, that is internally inconsistent, I've got to tell you. Look, of course we are facing a very challenging set of figures. We are, though, in a better position than most other countries around the world as a result of the hard work that we've done during our first 6 years in government. Imagine, the reason your figures weren't worse after 6 years of Labor government is because you started with a surplus, no government net debt, a positive net asset position. Guess what you left us behind? You left us behind massive debt and deficit and a deteriorating trajectory. So we have turned that situation around. We are in a better, stronger position than we would have been if we hadn't fixed the situation you left behind. But of course, we know, every reasonable Australian knows why we're here when it comes to the fiscal position we're in. That is because of the COVID recession, and the impact of the COVID recession on revenue in particular and government payments, and because of the cost of the decisions we've had to make to support the economy and to support jobs.
Senator Gallagher, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. The analysis by the IPA also revealed that gross Commonwealth government debt will not be paid off until the year 2080. Can the minister confirm that a child born today will be 60 before the Morrison government's record $1.7 trillion of debt is paid off?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A child born today will have better opportunities to get ahead in the future because of the hard yards that our government did in our first 6 years in government to repair the budget and to strengthen the economy. And the child born today will be in a better position, have better opportunities to get ahead because of our plan to get Australia out of this COVID recession, because of our plan to create jobs, because of our plan to maximise the strength of the economic and jobs recovery. People across Australia know that if we had not stepped up earlier this year, young people today and into the future would have been worse off, would have faced a more challenging environment and would have found it harder to get ahead. It is as the result of our hard yards in our first 6 years in government and through this coronavirus pandemic and this coronavirus-induced recession. It's because of our work that young people today and into the future will have the best possible opportunity to get ahead.
Senator Gallagher, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. Can the minister confirm the IPA's assessment that under the Morrison government, and I quote, a budget surplus will not return until 2046?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I got to say, I'm quite impressed by Senator Gallagher's optimism about the Morrison government in 2046, I commend her for her optimism that we will still have good government, good Morrison government in Australia in 2046. And let me tell you, the Australian economy will be stronger and better for us.
Order. Senator, on both sides of the chamber, at this end. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to Senator Cormann, representing the Prime Minister. For the anthropogenic global warming hypothesis to be accepted scientifically, it must be based on physical empirical data. During my meetings with the CSIRO, it was confirmed that CSIRO relies only on erroneous, unvalidated, computerised climate models, not physical data. This is a third admission of CSIRO's lack of empirical evidence proving causation. Both types of climate models have repeatedly failed to match physical data and observations. Yet CSIRO has allowed this government to take confidence in climate models, and that has led to economically destructive policies on the Australian economy. Senator Cormann, will you support an inquiry that would analyse and assess quantitatively the accuracy and levels of confidence in CSIRO's climate models?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Australia is committed to effective action on climate change. The debate that we've had in Australia over the last decade is about what the best methodology would be to achieve effective global greenhouse gas emissions in a way that is economically responsible. We think it is very important to maximise the emissions reduction effort in a way that is economically responsible, because that, of course, our success in securing emissions reductions in a way that is economically responsible and doesn't undermine the opportunities for working families to get ahead is a very important way to lead by example for the rest of the world. Because if the rest of the world can see that we can achieve both emissions reductions and economic and jobs growth, then other countries will follow our lead. And that is, of course, we want all countries to do the best they can to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions in a way that is economically responsible, and I commend that approach to you.
Senator Roberts, a supplementary question.
Respected economist Dr Alan Moran has compiled government data to show climate policies and renewable subsidies are costing Australians $13 billion extra in higher electricity costs per year, and that is $1,300 extra per household. Minister, is it fair and reasonable that the most vulnerable people in our society, the poor, the elderly, students, the unemployed, are paying 39% of their electricity bills on a fanciful, pointless crusade to change global temperature. It is a highly regressive impost on
Senator
these people.
Roberts. Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Our government has worked very hard to reduce the costs of electricity and to improve both the reliability as well as the affordability of energy supplies. At the same time as working to reduce emissions and meet our emissions reduction targets agreed to in Paris. And I'm pleased to report to the Senate that we are being very successful in that endeavour. Electricity prices are coming down, both for households and for business, and emissions are coming down, and we are meeting our emissions reduction targets, both those agreed to in Kyoto and those that we've committed to in Paris. So, I mean, we are actually achieving what we set out to achieve, but we're doing it in an economically responsible fashion, which we believe is very important, and it's only fair it's only fair for the working families of Australia that that's how we do it.
Senator Roberts, final supplementary question.
Using the government's own data, Dr Moran calculates that energy users subsidise every wind turbine $526,000 every year for 15 years. Australia has 2,691 wind turbines, and that means you are making electricity users pick up the bill of $1.4 billion each year. That's $21.2 billion over their short lifetime. How can you justify adding this massive cost burden to consumers and to industry?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Again, I mean, our government, for very good policy reasons, is committed to effective action on climate change. I mean, we are part of the global community, and we are part of global efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we got to do that in a globally coordinated fashion. We've got to do it in a way that is economically responsible. That is the policy of the Australian government, and that is what we are effectively pursuing.
Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Resources, Water and Northern Australia, Senator Birmingham. Australia's resources sector represents 9% of Australia's GDP, employs over 65,000 people in Queensland alone, and the resources sector is anticipated to pay over $4 billion in royalties to the Queensland Government in the 2019-20 financial year. The Morrison-McCormack Liberal National Government has committed more than $200 million worth of measures to support the resources sector as part of this week's budget. Can the minister outline why our government is steadfast in its commitment to this important industry?
The Minister representing the Minister for Resources, Water and Northern Australia, Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, Mr. President, and I thank Senator Canavan for his question. Of course, Senator Canavan, a renowned champion of the Australian resources sector in particular. And the Australian resources industry, Mr. President, is a world leader when it comes to the extraction, to the production and to the export of high-quality resources. The industry represents a significant proportion of Australia's economy, and it is the backbone for many regional communities and towns across Australia, as Senator Canavan and indeed all of my Liberal and National colleagues know and appreciate. The resources industry represents some 9% of Australia's GDP, and importantly, that grew last financial year, by some 0.5%, worth $7 billion extra to Australia's economy as a result. In 2019-20, our resource and energy exports reached a record $290 billion for Australia. Our iron ore was the first commodity to ever record more than $100 billion in export revenue. Our gold industry is poised to become the world's largest producer, forecast to record some $31 billion of production in 2020-2021. Even in the midst of the most significant global pandemic and economic shock, the resources industry is investing in Australia and in Australians and Australian jobs, with mining capital investment increasing by some 5.4% over the course of the last financial year. The resources industry is already a supporter of Australian jobs, employing some 247,000 Australians in August this year, an increase of almost 6,000 compared with February this year. And of course, they are just direct contributions. The resources industry supports so many more jobs than those direct contributions. That's why the Morrison-McCormack government recognises its importance and continues to invest in the industry and its growth potential.
A supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can the minister outline what commitments our government has made as part of this week's budget to ensure that continued investment and expansion across our mining industry in this great country?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, we've made a number of new investments to support energy, minerals, groundwater resources and improve their understanding and development during this budget. Our $124.5 million expansion of the Exploring for the Future program will improve the understanding of Australia's resources, identifying the resource potential of key regions across Australia. We understand the importance of developing our natural resources, which is why we've committed $28.3 million for 5 strategic basin plans, charting a quicker pathway for their development. We also recognise the need to provide communities living in gas development regions with independent and transparent information, hence our support for the CSIRO's Gas Industry Social and Environmental Research Alliance with some $13.7 million. As part of our commitment to emissions reduction and to meeting the targets of the Paris Agreement, we provided a further $50 million towards the Carbon Capture Use and Storage Development Fund. And indeed, Mr President, our government, in recognising the potential for use of our resources, is of course investing
Senator
in
Birmingham.
manufacturing.
Senator Canavan, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Is the minister aware of any risks to the mining industry and jobs in my home state of Queensland? And while I have the time, could I also ask if the minister has the time on this Saturday to come up to Claremont in central Queensland and attend our Bob Brown tribute rally, where we'll be highlighting those risks once again?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator Canavan for the further question and indeed the invitation, Mr President. In terms of threats, Senator Canavan and others know a little more about Queensland politics than me, but it's tempting to say one of those threats indeed could be Jackie Trad, so I understand, a name that I hear again and again in terms of the risks, Mr President, that are faced by the Queensland resources sector. Sadly, Queensland, even coming in pre-COVID, had amongst the highest unemployment, the highest level of bankruptcies and the lowest business confidence in Australia. And it's an economy that is so reliant on the resources and energy and mining sector. That's why it's disappointing to see delays in approvals for developments such as the New Hope's New Acland Stage 3. It's a prime example of legal and bureaucratic intervention delaying the potential creation of new jobs, new opportunities in a state like Queensland, and of course losing the potential for 500 additional jobs through these types of delays doesn't help
Senator
anybody.
Birmingham. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs.
Right. Sorry, I'm going to ask Senator Faruqi to start again. I've asked for silence during questions. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs. Last month, ASIO advised the Parliament that right-wing violent extremism occupies approximately between 30% and 40% of ASIO's current caseload in counter-terrorism work, an increase from 10% to 15% prior to 2016. This is an extraordinary increase over a very short period of time. In August, the 9 papers reported that ASIO has been focused on the possibility of extremists being inspired by killers such as the Christchurch gunman. As a Muslim and as a progressive senator, I find these reports incredibly troubling, but they align with what I see online, on social media and in the correspondence I receive. While it's good that the security services are investigating these threats, there appears to be zero political appetite to invest in new initiatives to address the growth of far-right extremism. What is the government doing to tackle the growing threat of far-right extremism and white supremacy?
The Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Faruqi for her question. And Senator Faruqi, the government has made it abundantly clear that we are absolutely committed to protecting Australia and Australians from all threats. In terms of our laws, you will be aware that our arrangements are ideologically agnostic and they focus on the threat of criminality. As a government, we make no distinction in targeting threats to the Australian community. Our agencies, and I commend our agencies, are working hard to tackle the threats from all sources, whether they be from Islamist extremism, right-wing extremism or any other source. Australians should have confidence that Australia's counter-terrorism arrangements work equally well for right-wing motivated groups and individuals as they do for Islamic extremism. I will make the point, though, that under the former Labor government, Labor actually cut $128 million from the AFP between 2010 and 11 and 2013 and 14. But Senator Faruqi, our laws and arrangements are ideologically agnostic and they focus on threat and criminality.
Senator Faruqi, a supplementary question.
Minister, a national anti-racism strategy has not been funded at the federal level in 5 years. In July 2020 inquiry submission, the Australian Human Rights Commission reiterated its support for a strategy, stating a national anti-racism strategy is necessary to protect the unity, safety and security of our society and to ensure that our citizens and diaspora communities are protected from racial discrimination and race hate. Why does the government continue to refuse to fund a national anti-racism strategy?
Senator Cash.
Well, Senator Faruqi, you would be aware that we have laws in relation to racism. Those laws already exist, and if you are in breach of those laws, there are consequences.
Order. Senator Faruqi, a final supplementary question.
Is the minister concerned by MPs in the Liberal and National parties who have in the last few years attended far-right rallies, spoken at far-right rallies and engaged with and given interviews to far-right media outlets? And will the minister condemn those members for their behaviour, including George Christensen MP, who last week fessed up to following extremist social media groups? Will you condemn him and others?
Order. Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, and unfortunately I did not actually hear the last part of your question, Senator Faruqi, due to the noise in the chamber.
Sorry, are you on a point of order, Senator Faruqi?
Point of order. If the minister didn't hear the question because of all the shouting going on, I would like the indulgence of the Senate to repeat the question.
I was going to ask, could you repeat the last part of your question, and can I ask senators again to remain silent during the question, even if it is a contested matter? There's a time for this debate to be debated afterwards. Senator Faruqi, if you could repeat the last part of your question.
Will the minister condemn those members for their behaviour, including George Christensen MP, who last week fessed up to following extremist social media groups?
Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Senator Faruqi. I am not aware of the circumstances that you're referring to, but certainly I would condemn right-wing extremism, I would condemn left-wing extremism.
Well done. Senator Sheldon.
Right. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Cormann. What guarantees can the Minister give that the government's hiring credit scheme will not be used by employers to cut the hours of existing employees who are ineligible for the subsidy, in order to employ new workers to replace them who are eligible for the subsidy?
The Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr President. That is a very fair question, and it's obviously something that we've considered as we designed the programme. The job maker hiring credit is only available for additional jobs. Employers cannot reduce their current workforce either by dismissing employees or reducing their hours and re-engage new workers performing the same work to receive the hiring credits. I mean, we've put some integrity measures in place, and the most important ones are the fact that any employer who wants to take advantage of this scheme has to demonstrate that both their payroll, the size of their payroll as well as the number of employees is going up. So the business's total employee headcount, minimum of one additional employee from the reference date of 30 September 2020, and the payroll of the business for the reporting period as compared to the 3 months to 30 September 2020 has to be higher. So to demonstrate that the job is additional, those specific criteria must be met and so they must meet this double-barreled additionality criteria in order to be able to access this credit. All employees have protections also, as Senator Sheldon will be aware, under industrial relations laws from unfair or unlawful dismissal, including non-genuine redundancies, and there are other integrity measures in place to ensure that employers cannot reclassify existing workers from contractors to employees to receive the hiring credit or move employees between entities within a single group. I hope that addresses Senator Sheldon's question.
Senator Sheldon, a supplementary question.
What assurances can the minister give that the government's hiring credit scheme will not incentivise employers to lay off casual workers working greater than 20 hours a week and then hire more workers who are eligible for the subsidy?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, I think that I've fundamentally answered that question. We clearly, as we were putting this scheme in place, we've put these integrity measures in place. And what is the incentive for the employer not to do this? Well, if the employer were to do this, they would no longer be eligible for the scheme. I would have thought, if the employer wants to access the scheme, they can't do what Senator Sheldon has just described.
Senator Sheldon, a final supplementary.
What assurances can the minister provide that a young worker hired under the government's hiring credit scheme will still have their job once the scheme ends in October 2021?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, the usual industrial relations laws apply, and what we are doing through this hiring credit is give young people an opportunity to work over this 12-month period and to establish a track record of work performance which will stand them in good stead as they pursue their career moving forward.
Senator O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash. Can the minister outline to the Senate how the budget's JobMaker plan is backing small businesses to recover, rebuild, reinvest and employ more Australians as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic?
The Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank Senator O'Sullivan for his question. And, Mr. President, you'd be aware that this week's budget is all about jobs, backing those Australians who are in jobs and ensuring that they stay in those jobs, and obviously getting as many Australians back into work as we can. And a fundamental part of that plan is backing our small and family businesses every step of the way. They are the engine room of the Australian economy in so many different ways. They're major drivers of employment, in fact employing over 6 million Australians and contributing around $418 billion to our national economy. The CEO of the Council of Small Businesses Australia, Peter Strong, he has welcomed the Budget 2020 as providing great things in it for small business people. And, Mr. President, in terms of what we're doing for small businesses across Australia, we are, of course, allowing them to invest in themselves. We're supercharging the instant asset write-off by delivering temporary full expensing, allowing businesses to write off the full cost of eligible depreciable assets until the 30th of June 2020. And of course we understand that so many businesses have done it tough as a result of COVID-19, and they need that important cash flow. So we're providing $4.9 billion in tax relief through temporary loss carryback. This is going to allow businesses impacted by COVID-19 to write off their bad years against their previous good year. We're also expanding access to small business tax concessions. We're providing $105 million in tax relief to an additional 20,000 business and their employers. Importantly, in the skills space, we're removing costly barriers for business to train their employees by exempting employer-provided retraining from fringe benefits tax. This will allow small businesses to capitalise on our $7 billion skills investment. Small and family business, Mr. President, they are the backbone of the Australian economy, and in the Budget 2020 we are backing them every step of the way.
Senator O'Sullivan, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. COVID-19 has meant that many businesses have had to adapt, innovate and build their digital capability. How is the budget's JobMaker digital business plan supporting small businesses to grow digital and grow their businesses?
Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr. President. And one of the things that COVID-19 has shown us is the importance of digitisation and building resilience for small businesses. In fact, so many of those businesses that were able to pivot overnight, and in particular in the hospitality industry, were those businesses who were digitally literate. COVID-19 has just well and truly accelerated digital growth in our economy, and an important part of our budget is supporting small businesses to adapt to this challenge. We are investing, as you're aware, $800 million in our JobMaker digital business plan, and that is all about supporting small businesses to embrace digital technologies. We are investing over $19 million to support small businesses to go digital by expanding the Australian Small Business Advisory Service Digital Solutions Program, otherwise known as ASPAS, to a further 10,000 small businesses. And in fact, the Chamber of Commerce, the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, have endorsed the policy, noting it will create the jobs Australia needs.
Senator O'Sullivan, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. We've seen the impact of health restrictions and shutdowns, how they've put enormous pressure on the mental health of all Australians. How is this budget helping to support the mental health and well-being of Australia's small business owners?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, as we'd all be aware, COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on Australia and Australians, but in particular has brought considerable challenges for our hard-working small business owners and their staff right around Australia. But that is why the government, in this budget, is investing $7 million, a further $7 million, to support the mental health of small business owners through our Business Balance initiative. Business Balance will expand Beyond Blue's new access program to small business owners, and it will provide them with free, accessible and tailored support to help manage the pressures of COVID-19. We're also providing funding to expand Deakin University's free, accredited professional development program to build the mental health literacy of trusted business advisors like accountants and bookkeepers. The investment has been welcomed by Beyond Blue Chair, the Honourable Julia Gillard AC, and it will assist small business owners who have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Women, Senator Ruston. Today, Mr Morrison referred to those expressing concern that women have been left behind by his government's budget as, and I quote, voices of disruption, of division. Does the minister agree with Mr Morrison that Australian women concerned about being left behind by this government are just voices of disruption, of division?
The Minister representing the Minister for Women, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you very much, Senator O'Neill, for your question. One of the things that has probably most greatly concerned me over the last few days in response to the budget by those opposite and others has been the lack of understanding of the depth of the measures that are in this budget that support Australia's women. And you know, as a woman in this place, and representing today the Minister for Women, Senator Payne, it is very distressing that we have not seen the kind of credit for the massive level of investment that have been made in all Australians over the last 7 months as we have managed our way through the pandemic, and again on Tuesday night with the measures that have been put in place to help Australia's women. And as I said, apart from all of the general measures of which the majority have been accessible to women, there have been dedicated measures that have been specifically targeted towards assisting women in this budget. We've been through them on a number of occasions in this place, but I'm more than happy to stand here again and talk about some of the great initiatives that were contained in Tuesday night's budget for women. And these are on top of a number of measures that have been contained in other announcements over the past 7 months, as Australia has come to terms with a pandemic that has never been experienced in the lifetime of anybody that is sitting in this chamber. But we will absolutely stand by our record as a government in supporting women, and I too am happy to stand by my record in the time that I've been the Minister responsible for Families and Social Services about initiatives that we have undertaken to assist Australia's women. As I said, the Women's Economic Security Statement absolutely specifically targeted to make sure that we return the level of work participation by Australia's women back to the highest levels, and hopefully—
Order, Senator Ruston. Senator O'Neill, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. In response to criticism of the Morrison government's budget, the Prime Minister's office has said that, and I quote, "No one credible was making that criticism." Is that really the government's position?
Senator Ruston.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you once again, Senator O'Neill, for your supplementary question. What I would say is that I have been extremely disappointed at some of the commentary that we have received about the budget that has had absolutely lacked any understanding or acceptance that there have been a number of measures in this budget that are specifically targeted towards women, but equally we have a number of measures. In fact, just about every single measure that is contained in the budget it applies to women. And the idea that we would have a budget that is gender-specific in every single measure that's contained in it is completely ludicrous and completely ludicrous. Well, I noticed Senator McAllister asked me about just one measure. I can go through many measures. We can talk about the paid parental leave changes. We can talk about the advanced apprenticeships for women. We can talk about the Female Leaders Initiative. We can talk about a number of measures.
Time for the answers expired. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr President. In his International Women's Day address last year, Mr Morrison said of gender equality, and I quote, "We want women to rise, but we don't want to see women rise only on the basis of others doing worse." Is this why Scott Morrison's budget has left women behind?
Senator Ruston.
Well, first and foremost, the Morrison budget, delivered by the Treasurer, Mr Frydenberg, on Tuesday night, did not leave women behind. In fact, I would say that the budget on Tuesday night was one of the most comprehensive suite of interrelated measures to support all Australians, and the support has been specifically targeted at areas of greatest need. Clearly, there are initiatives contained in the budget that are targeted specifically to women. We've been through them on numerous occasions, but as I said, I'll go through them again if you want to ask me another question. But equally, we have got measures that have targeted other areas of our community where there's a greatest need. Clearly, the work credits that has been put in place was targeting the fact that so many young people had lost their jobs during the pandemic. Clearly, there are other initiatives that are contained in the budget that are focused on Indigenous Australians in areas of need. This budget is targeted, focused
Senator
and measured.
Ruston. Order. Senator Chandler.
Thank you, Mr President.
Order.
My question is to the Minister for Youth and Sport, Senator Colbeck. The Morrison government is ensuring maximum opportunities exist for young Australians with the best available opportunities in education and employment prospects and the most appropriate assistance for those that require help during the COVID-19 crisis. How is the government's plan for jobs, as outlined in Tuesday night's budget, supporting young Australians to access job opportunities and rebuild their connections to employers during these times?
Question. The Minister for Youth and Sport, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President, and thanks Senator Chandler for her question, Mr President. We know as a government that young Australians have been adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting impacts on essential services. Mr President, but Tuesday night's budget paved the way for a road to recovery. The coalition government has committed $4 billion to support young people into work through the JobMaker hiring credit, which provides a wage subsidy of $200 a week for up to a year to make eligible position available for a young person aged 16 to 29 years, or $100 a week for those aged 30 to 35 who have been receiving the job seeker payment, youth allowance or parenting payment for at least 1 month within the last 3 months before they were hired. Mr President, the Morrison government has always focused on creating jobs. Since the coalition was elected in 2013 to the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw the Australian economy create 1.5 million new jobs. The budget on Tuesday night further demonstrated our government's commitment to getting the Australian economy back on track and Australians back into the workforce, with young Australians being a key focus of that commitment, Mr President. The JobMaker hiring credit will accelerate growth in employment during the recovery by giving organisations incentives to take on additional employees, Mr President, that are young job seekers aged 16 to 35 years old. It's expected, Mr President, that the JobMaker hiring credit will support around 450,000 positions for young people to move back into employment. As the Treasurer outlined in the budget speech, Mr President, having a job means much more than just having an income.
Senator Chandler, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, I recognise, and this government recognises, the important role of our apprentices to our economy and communities across Australia. What initiatives is the government investing in to recognise the importance of our young apprentices and trainees?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. This government is acutely aware of the devastating impact that COVID-19 has played on the employment of many young Australians. That's why the Morrison government has announced $1.2 billion to encourage employers to take on apprentices and trainees through a new commencement wage subsidy. Mr President, this $1.2 billion additional dollars will enable us to support 100,000 new apprentice commencements. And Mr President, as someone who started their working career as a tradie, I can only commend it to any young person out there who's looking to start work. It's a great start off in life, Mr President. This measure will help prevent future skill shortages and create opportunities for women and young people, including recent school leavers, Mr President, and employers of any size or industry Australia-wide who engage in Australian apprentices from the 5th of October through to the 31st of September 21 will be eligible under this program.
Senator Chandler, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. On top of recent actions to engage young people and identify the mental challenges they are facing, what investment is the government making to ensure young Australians have access to mental health support?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. And this is one area where young people have been significantly impacted, and we all remain extremely concerned about their mental health. And we're committed to ensuring the mental health of young people is maintained throughout our ongoing investment into youth mental health and suicide prevention measures. The Australian government, Mr President, has invested an unprecedented $5.7 billion in mental health in 2020-2021 alone. We've doubled the number of Medicare-funded psychological services from 10 to 20 through the Better Access Initiative, and additional mental health support will be available to young people living in bushfire-affected regions and those bearing the brunt of COVID-19. On top of this, Mr President, the government is driving the largest expansion of the Headspace network from 124 services to 153 services nationally by 2022.
Order. Senator Colbeck. Senator Wong.
I seek leave to make a very short statement.
Leave is granted. Senator Wong.
I thank the Senate. I note that today is, given today's announcement, Senator Cormann's last question time. I know that we will have the opportunity tomorrow to say nice or not nice things about him, should we wish. But I did want to take the opportunity on his last question time to make a comment about ministerial accountability. Ministerial accountability to the people through the parliament is central and fundamental to our democracy, and question time is central to that accountability. Whilst I would say that at times I thought he could have given better answers, Senator Cormann does understand. He understands that belief in democracy demands respect of norms and institutions, and he sought to reflect that in his behaviour. My hope is that more in the executive government could always do the same.
Senator Cormann.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Wong for his kind remarks, and look forward to a more extensive conversation tomorrow. I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper, and I seek leave to move a motion relating to the sitting of the Senate on Friday, 9 October 2020.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted.
I thank the Senate. I move that divisions may take place on Friday, 9 October 2020.
Question is that motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Are there any motions to take note of answers? Oh, Senator McAllister.
Thanks, Madam Deputy President. I rise to take note of the answers given by Senator Ruston to the questions asked by Senators McCarthy, Keneally and O'Neill. Well, the Prime Minister has described those expressing concern that women have been left behind by his government's budget as voices of disruption and division. And more disturbingly, some young man, I assume it was a young man in the Prime Minister's office, took time out of his busy day to ring up a female journalist and take her to task for her coverage of his government's budget, and saying that no one credible was making criticisms of the government's budget on the grounds of its inadequacies in terms of women. Well, when the Minister representing the Minister for Women was asked about these comments, her response is simply to say she's concerned about the level of understanding about how her budget works. How patronising. How patronising to say that the voices of Australian women, when they raise their voice, raise objections about how this government performs, how this government responds to their issues, the answer is, oh, they clearly just don't understand. Well, I'll tell you what. If I have to choose between the Morrison government and the credible women who are raising concerns about their budget, I know who I will choose. I will choose the credible women every single day. And for the people on the other side who don't understand the issues, because I think it's this government who doesn't understand, it's not Australian women, let me take you through it. We are facing the worst recession in almost 100 years. It's a recession triggered by a global pandemic, and it has disproportionately affected Australian women. Women have lost their jobs, and they've lost their hours, and they've lost them at a faster rate than men. Since March, almost 200,000 women have lost their jobs, and 110,000 women have left the labour force altogether. At the peak of the coronavirus restrictions earlier this year, more than 1 million women had no work whatsoever. And outside the workforce, a whole lot of new tasks accrued to women in the home: homeschooling, looking after unwell people, a massive increase in the burden of work at home. But during the pandemic, what did the government do? What did they do to support women? Well, they set up JobKeeper in a way that excluded short-term casuals, which overwhelmingly impacted women more than men. They withdrew JobKeeper from the childcare sector, unbelievably, and the women who were excluded from other measures of support were told that what they should do was draw down from their already meagre super balances, forcing women to choose between their financial security now and their financial security in retirement. The government had an opportunity to redeem themselves in this budget. They had an opportunity to fix some of this stuff up, because there is no doubt that Australian women have borne the brunt of the pandemic and the Morrison recession that's accompanied it. But despite racking up more than $1 trillion worth of debt, the Prime Minister's office rehashed the Women's Economic Statement and allocated $230 million in new funding, 0.024% of the new spending measures in the budget. Now, for absolute clarity, we are spending more in this budget on a waste recycling program than we are on the Women's Economic Security Statement. We are planning to spend more on buying petrol than we are on the Women's Economic Security Statement. We're spending twice as much on putting in a new computer system in the Department of Human Services than we are on the Women's Economic Security Statement in this budget. So when credible women say to you on the government benches, your budget does not deliver for us, a humble government, a listening government, would actually take that concern seriously. It would listen and respond. It would not try to demean and diminish the voices of people who raise their concerns about your performance, because that is essentially the kind of arrogance that will not be rewarded will not be rewarded, because people who raise concerns about women's issues are not voices of disruption or of division. We are ordinary voices of Australian women who are tired of having our interests ignored by a government that only sees the world through male eyes, that appears incapable of appreciating women's perspectives, disinterested in addressing it, and hostile to hearing women's voices. I stand with the credible women.
Thank you, Senator McAllister. Senator Rennick.
Deputy President, what a great day to be doing Take Note, because I get to talk about my favourite subject, women. And I'd like to give a shout out to my beautiful wife, my beautiful daughter, my beautiful sisters, my mother, my passed away mother, my grandmothers. They were all working women. They were all working women. And the one thing that we will never do on this side of the chamber is leave women behind. Leave our women behind. But the other thing we will never do on this side of the chamber is leave our children behind or leave our families behind. Or leave our families behind. You know, and I'd like to reflect on the comments of another great Australian woman, Quintin Bryce, Australia's first female Governor-General, who, when talking about the complexities of trying to raise your children and going back to work, she said, you can have it all, you don't necessarily have to have it all at once. And I think it's terribly presumptuous of those on the other side of the chamber to think that they know what every woman wants. Some women don't necessarily want to go back to work straight away. Some might like to stay home while their children are young. And if that's what they want to do, we on this side of the chamber will support that, because we on this side of the chamber believe in choice and believe in our children. And that's different to that side of the chamber that believes in command and control. This side, choice, children, families. That side of the chamber, command and control. But of course, there's more to it than what these Labor like to make out. And we've got it here, our old friend Auntie, the ABC, and they're not the greatest friends of the coalition, but fact-checked a few years ago, did a fact-check on, was Labor's childcare fund only ever about the union? Was it only ever about the union? And the result was in the ballpark. And if I can just read it, it says, there are reasonable criticisms of the amount allocated to the fund, the uneven way it was distributed and the adoption of a first-come, first-served policy. This process favoured the union. This process favoured the union. And that is one thing we will never do on this side of the chamber, is unionise parenthood. And that is the difference between this side of the chamber and that side of the chamber, because that side of the chamber puts unions first. It doesn't put our children first. It doesn't put women first. It doesn't put the welfare of all Australians first. It puts the unions first all the time. And whenever they're talking about these issues, you can always be sure that in the background it's always about the unions. It's always about the unions. So let's just look at some of the numbers in the budget here, because there's these allegations that there's no money in the budget for women, there's no budget, money in the budget for women's support. So let's just quote a couple of figures here. Women are getting $242 million for the women's workforce participation. So we're spending $240 million to get women back into work. And should I also say that we're putting there's $9 billion for childcare. $9 billion in this year's budget for childcare. But on top of that, there's $20 billion for the family tax benefit. Now, I forget who it was before, one of the Labor senators mentioned that 2/3 of people who stay at home are women. So we're supporting stay-at-home parents to the tune of $20 billion. There's parental income support of another $7 billion. There's child support of $2 billion. Support for the childcare system, $1.5 billion. Another $600 million for families and children. So all up, there's about $40 billion to help families. Women are a part of families. So there is a lot of money in this budget for both childcare, for families and to help women get back into the workforce. So I totally refute the allegations that the coalition doesn't support women. And we should just touch on a few other big discounts in the budget here. I noticed Senator McAllister before, of course, raised the issue of superannuation. If we look at the biggest tax concessions in the budget, guess what it is? The second and third biggest: concessional taxation of superannuation entity earnings, concessional taxation of employer superannuation contributions, over $40 billion in superannuation contributions. Wow. So I tell you what—
Thank you, Senator Rennick. Your time has expired. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Deputy President. And I find it hard to believe some of the contributions and some of the answers that we've received to our questions today about the actual fact of what is confronting Australian women at this time, and the tone deafness, not only of the answers they've given us today, but their inability to hear the reality, to see and understand the reality of what is happening to Australian women right now in the course of this Morrison crisis that's been inflicted on us. The Morrison— I do mean the Morrison recession, but it's a crisis of a great proportion because there is no adequate response. Just where I live, in the seat of Robertson, for example, before the recession, the Central Coast had the highest underemployment of unskilled female workers in the entire country. They have not been noticed. They have not been heard. There is no response, despite putting us in debt as a nation to the tune of $1 trillion. Those women's needs remain unanswered. These were women at the front line of the aged care crisis and the front line of the pandemic, and the government has now turned its back on them. Women on the Central Coast of New South Wales lost work hours much faster than men. They were 50% more likely to stop looking for work than men, and they are suffering more significantly than men. You think a government would know about these things. You think the government would have some plan in their response, in their budget, to that reality. Data from the New South Wales Parliamentary Library shows us that employment growth slowed to a trickle, while more people than ever were leaving the coast to commute for many hours for jobs. That's the reality before these guys got to the pandemic. And it's so much worse now. Senator Rennick mentioned the union movement, and I want to stand firmly with the SDA union and other great union leaders who are the only voice standing up for workers who are much maligned by this government. As they said, this is a blue budget for a pink recession. There is totally inadequate support for women. 200,000 women who work in accommodation, food services and retail trade sector all missed out on JobSeeker due to its design flaws around casual employees. They're suffering. Their families are suffering. And of $1 trillion that is going to be wrapped up as debt for this country, there is no relief in sight for those women. The number of women on JobSeeker has jumped by 124% over the past 12 months, surging past their male counterparts in August. And what does it mean for the women who end up on JobSeeker? Well, let me just give you a little bit of the flavour of what it was like for an amazing woman who gave evidence to a committee hearing that we had in Launceston at the end of 2019. This is the kind of Australian woman that this government is leaving behind. Her name was Deborah, and this is what she said. I've worked a total of 35 years for Australia, and my last position was for 22 years. I've worked 30 of those 35 years in factory work, so it was physical labour and your body can only take that for so long. In 2016 I was made redundant. The factory I worked at closed in November of that year, and I was made redundant in July. I went to Centrelink to be told that I had to live on my redundancy for 18 months, which I did. After that, they put me on New Start. Now, the equivalent of that is JobSeeker. So to say that going from a paid job to New Start is a shock to the system is a bit of an understatement because budgeting is impossible. There's just no money to budget. There's just not enough money to go around. I followed all the instructions from Centrelink and my job provider to the letter. I had my payments suspended 5 times so far this year due to no fault of mine, and that's stressful. When you get a text message, actually on Wednesday, I reported, and when I got to the end of my report, it said your payment has been suspended. I had to get out of that, ring my job provider and ask what is going on. It happens all the time. My medical scripts cost about $80+ a month. I've used all my redundancy. I have few savings left. Frankly, I'm scared about what's going to happen to me when my car rego and my insurance, etc., come in, because there are no savings left. That's what I've been living on. I mean, am I going to be forced to live in my car? It makes me very sad, and it's demeaning when our Prime Minister says that New Start recipients are a blight on the Australian economy. That is the Mr Morrison who created the budget that we saw on Tuesday night. That is why Australian women are being left behind, because he simply doesn't.
Senator Bragg.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. Well, it is bizarre, to say the least, to hear opposition senators come into this place and talk about the Morrison recession, as we just heard Senator O'Neill mention. So, I mean, obviously, this is an issue which has gone right through the Labor Party. Mr Chalmers yesterday sent around an email talking about the Morrison recession, as if the COVID-19 crisis didn't exist. Now, the budget papers during the week revealed that, yes, the Australian economy has shrunk by 7% in the June quarter, and that compares to a 20% reduction in the UK and 12% in New Zealand. So this is the global recession that the Labor Party don't seem to be able to come to terms with, that is inflicting damage upon the world's economy. But given that this discussion is about women, I will now turn to that matter. Now, this budget is about improving the economic standing of this country and improving the standing of all the citizens of Australia. And yes, our whole economic response to this pandemic has been to try and be as broad-based as possible. We've spent $100 billion on the JobKeeper scheme, and that has kept businesses afloat, it's kept people in their jobs, it's kept people alive. Now, we can talk about the issues that have been raised during this Take Note, and as I say, the budget is based on a rising tide lifting all boats, and all boats being the Australian people. But of course, there is a gender pay gap, which is the lowest that it's been on record under our government leading into this pandemic. And so there is a recognition across our government that there is a need to deploy measures to deal with some of the issues that women in particular face. Now, in relation to childcare, which is often raised, I mean, I have never seen this as an issue for women. It's an issue for families. It is an issue for men and women. It's an issue for everyone. And so, solving childcare is not solving something which is a problem that should just only accrue to women. It is something that families need to work together on, and I don't see these issues as just falling into a women's bucket. But across the board, we have deployed measures in this budget which deal directly with some of the shortcomings in our economy. Now, one of the roles I'm performing in this place is chairing an inquiry into fintech. And during that inquiry, it has become clear that there is a need for us to do more training, to spend more time and more effort and more resources on ensuring that women have the skills to run tech businesses to be successful in the tech space. And so in this budget we have deployed $25 million into STEM cadetships for women. We've also put money into boost enterprise amongst women, with 280 odd startups expected to be created because of this scheme. Now, in the course of this inquiry, it's been a great pleasure to meet many founders and CEOs of fintech and regtech businesses who are women. So there are many of them that are successful already, and we want to see more and more businesses in this space. Now, in this budget, there have been a number of recommendations of the FinTech Committee adopted. So the research and development tax incentive recommendations have been adopted, and there's also been changes to the FBT, or fringe benefit tax arrangements, that will be forthcoming. Now, all of these things are designed, of course, to improve the amount of private investment into the tech space where men and women work, but we do want to see more women in this space, which is why we're deploying the STEM scheme. And again, I would reflect on some of the interactions that we've had at the committee, where there have been just some brilliant women who've come up with a tech idea, and they've gone into the market and they've established these businesses, and they're now deploying things in the buy now, pay later sector and whatnot. Now, this is a great tribute to female enterprise, but we do want to see more, so we are trying to provide some positive discrimination here in this field. But I would summarise my comments as saying this is the budget for all Australians. The rising tide does lift all boats.
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Senator McCarthy.
Madam Deputy President, $1 trillion in debt and nothing for women over the age of 35. In the Morrison government's budget, women are being left out and left behind. Day after day we see new evidence of the disproportionate impact COVID-19 is having on Australian women. But in response, the Morrison government has failed. Women have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, taking on 2/3 of the unpaid care work at home. Even before the pandemic hit, a significant number of job seeker recipients were middle-aged women. In August, there were 754,100 women receiving job seeker. Of those, 61% of these women were over 35. And the same research revealed a huge increase in the number of women in their 40s, 50s and 60s who relied on unemployment benefits for years. 1/3 of women aged at least 55 have been on unemployment support for at least 5 years. 460,000 women who are aged over 35 years are without work and face a future of living on $40 a day. They have been excluded from the Morrison government's hiring credit scheme and will need to compete against younger subsidised job seekers. So if you're a woman in your 40s who's been on JobKeeper during this recession, had your hours reduced, working in one of the industries such as hospitality or retail, and come March or April you lose your job, what is in the budget for you? Nothing. The Morrison government excluded many women from JobKeeper. The Morrison government only provided JobKeeper for 2/3 of early educators and then ripped JobKeeper from the sector before any other profession. 96% of women are early educators, or 96% of early educators are women, women working on the front line of the COVID-19 crisis. And what about First Nations women? Let's have a look at their story. There's no additional education funding for young First Nations women. The Clontarf Foundation funding supports the education of young First Nations men only. No additional health or legal justice services for First Nations women. No new money for further frontline domestic violence services, including no additional emergency and social housing to meet increased demand due to COVID-19. No COVID-19 recovery support for unemployed Indigenous women over 35 years of age to regain employment. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare estimates that of the 64,644 First Nations people who sought specialist help for homelessness back in 2016 to 17, 61% were women. First Nations women comprise 34% of all female prisoners, compared to 2% of the overall Australian population. Although the majority of people in prison are male, 97%, First Nations women are the most rapidly growing population of prisoners, with rates increasing by 150% since the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, twice the rate of other females and double the rate of First Nations males from 2000 to 2016. These women have often experienced poverty, grief and loss, domestic violence, racism and poor mental health. Senator Ruston has noted the Women's Economic Security Statement contained $240 million specific initiatives for women, $1.1 trillion of debt, and the Prime Minister's Women's Economic Statement contains just $240 million for 51% of the population. This is a pittance compared to multi-billion-dollar commitments directed to various male-dominated industries. The 2020 budget contains nothing to address significant job losses in industries dominated by women, yet women have represented more than 50% of job losses during the coronavirus-led economic downturn. There's no new funding for frontline domestic and family violence services that support women and their children escaping violence, nothing new to address the gender pay gap, nothing on superannuation and women's economic security and retirement, nothing on childcare, nothing on social housing, no plan for women in Australia.
Question is the motion moved by Senator McAllister be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, Mr President. I rise to take note of the answers given to my question, which was to Senator Cormann, representing the Prime Minister, in relation to the lack of support for Australia's artists, arts community, the art and creative sector, and the industries, of course, that rely on our artistic and creative workers. Artists right around the country were shocked on Tuesday night when the Treasurer, after 6 months of the industry suffering because of the various levels of restrictions and the hard blow to the industry because of COVID-19, that the Treasurer could not even utter the word art in his budget speech on Tuesday night. And it is just a disgrace. Hundreds of thousands of Australian workers within our arts and creative sector have been left out in the cold. Very little support has been put on the table for them. The government talks about the fact that they could have access to JobKeeper or JobSeeker without actually understanding that because of the nature of this industry, many artists and creative workers across the country have gone without anything. They don't qualify for JobKeeper, and some may be on JobSeeker, but of course we know that the government's about to force those people back to living on $40 a day. So it's hardly helping those who are struggling within those areas of work. And the fact that the budget has failed to recognise that this industry needs support, that it was one of the hardest hit, the first hit because of the COVID-19 recession, and will be the last to come out. You'd think that this government would have bothered to put more support on the table, but of course nothing. And one of the saddest things about all of this, of course, is that it pales in comparison to what other countries have done. And I asked Senator Cormann about this. In the UK, the government has put £1.5 billion on the table because they understand that the arts and cultural institutions and industry and sector is vital to a functioning democracy, vital to the economy. So too, of course, has Germany, billions of euros put on the table. We know that in France they have allowed for the a special unemployment scheme for actors, for performers, for artists who are out of work because of COVID-19. And of course, Senator Cormann is about to go and try and win the plum job of Secretary-General of the OECD. It's not much of a track record you're taking from Australia, Senator Cormann, when it comes to the arts and the creative sector. But of course, one of the worst parts of this budget has been that it's those sectors, majority employing women, who have been the hardest hit. We're talking the arts and the entertainment sector, we're talking hospitality, the tourism sector, retail, and despite all of that, most people who have lost their jobs because of COVID being women, most people who have lost their hours because of COVID being women, most people who are suffering through this recession being women, there's really nothing in there for women. So if you happen to work in the arts and the entertainment industry and you happen to be a woman, it's a pretty bad budget for you, a terrible budget for you. You've been left on the scrap heap. It is just absolutely appalling. And it does beg the question, Does this government have a problem with Australian women? Does this government have a problem with supporting Australia's women to get back into work, to have enough income to pay the bills and to have affordable childcare so they can get on and do it? Why has this Prime Minister left Australia's women on the scrap heap? Why has this Prime Minister left women out in the cold? He doesn't seem to like art very much. He doesn't seem to like culture very much. He loves the footy. He loves his tradies building renovated kitchens, and he's done nothing for women. It's a pretty sad day for Australian women and a pretty bad budget to boot.
The question is the motion moved by Senator Hansard-Young be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it.